The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you, listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys, they let us think that we're big boys, they let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat about all. We're with you. It's time for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Wednesday, November 15th, Thursday, November 16th. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night as we are live right here in the Great White North, on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, as we are here 7 days a week. We welcome you in If you're listening in on terrestrial stations WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead, we are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music, get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo. Bumblefoot is the official music of this show. Now, we're all over social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. No, make that Spaced Out Radio, no longer Spaced Out Radio Show. So you got to make sure you don't make the error like I just did. Go over to Spaced Out Radio and subscribe to it. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live, tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you head over to patreon.com for as low as $1 a month, you can become a patron of SOR as well. We'd be highly appreciative. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to sign into one of our chat rooms, either on Revolution Radio, Spreaker, Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club, or if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I will connect you with you live there as well. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. You can also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, watch great videos from UFO seekers and Contact TV, read up on the latest news on the Encounter Online dealing with everything paranormal. You can check out my latest blog there as well, and if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. The paranormal is alive and well in the Great White North. Although not as popular as in the United States or elsewhere, Canadians are starting to find interest in what ghost hunters, paranormal investigations, and haunted tours are all about. It's curiosity that people are starting to ask more questions about. We see it on a small stage where I am here in the Caribou region of British Columbia with the paranormal tour I hold monthly at the local museum. Once again, it's time to be joined by Mike Morin from Haunted Crew of Canada here in British Columbia. And tonight we're also joined by Daniel Cumerlato, who helps run Ghost Walks out of Toronto, Ontario. It's become a very popular tour of some of the most haunted locations in southern Ontario, with stops in Toronto, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and Hamilton. Cumerlato tells the stories of Canada's historic past through the ghosts that hang out. Their website, ghostwalks.com. Daniel and Mike, welcome to Spaced Out Radio. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show, Dave. Really appreciate it.
Oh, we appreciate you coming in. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, just a bit under the weather.
Yes, Mr. Mike is battling a flu because, you know, that's just what he does. He deals with the public on a daily basis, and that is what goes on. So Mike's going to be a trooper here tonight, and he's going to battle on in with us. Dan, thank you so much for joining us for the next 2 hours. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's late on the East Coast, but one of these stories that we have is a lot of our American listeners, and our audience is about 70% American. They want to hear some new ghost stories. They're used to the stories of all the haunted old Wild West hotels and haunted jails and haunted, asylums, Gettysburg, you name it. They have heard the stories umpteen dozen times from umpteen dozen angles. So what we're trying to do here is give our audience some new ghost stories. But let's learn a little bit about you, Dan. When did you start getting interest in the paranormal?
It's a funny story. I'm going to give you the summarized Coles Notes version of it. Basically, living in Toronto. I'm not from the city, so we didn't know a lot of people. And what we did to pass the time, me and my wife at the time, is we played with a Ouija board. So going through the session, and we had a little cassette recorder in the corner, and I asked, Spirit, are you here? And it went very slow up to yes. And I didn't have the same patience back then that I have today. And I ended the session, and we listened to the tape recorder, and you hear my voice in the distance. And right after I'm done, you hear another male voice say yes. So I had what you'd say in the paranormal investigative community as an EVP or a ghost sound. So I started looking around. Somebody did explain it to me. I ended up finding some producers for a show who didn't believe it at all. They thought we faked it. And at the same time as we met with them, they told us about a house in the city of Hamilton that they called Canada's version of Amityville. So I was intrigued, and when we came back to Hamilton, found the house not as haunted as they said it was, but the article that I wrote for that back in the year 2000 would become the first article that we posted on our new paranormal website, Haunted Hamilton, and then it just kind of spiraled out from there over the years.
Did you grow up learning about hauntings? Did you know about them as a kid, or was it just a game where you thought, wow, I wonder if this is haunted, and the way kids do things, before you had your Ouija board experience?
Oh, it's very true. You know what? I was always big into history. I always loved history, and that's where it spanned out for me. But even when I was a kid, I lived in a almost century-old house. And my brother, who was in the room beside mine, used to say that he'd wake up in the middle of the night to see a little boy standing in the room there. And I used to joke with him. I said, oh, that was me. I like to watch you sleep. But it wasn't. It was something else. So there was a little boy haunting the house. And I guess that kind of got me into it a little bit, but I wasn't really serious into it until becoming an investigator back in 2000.
Was it something that you always thought you would do, Dan, get involved in the ghost hunting industry, or did you feel you had to do it in order to satisfy your own curiosity as to what was happening?
Yeah, kind of. You know, when I got into it, I had a lot of people that I worked with who were more the scientific investigators and the psychic investigators. To be completely honest, and I don't know, Mike might disagree with me on this, but I didn't really have the patience for investigating. Like, you know, some would go for hours long, and then you'd have to come back the next day and the next day just to get a little bit of evidence. What I enjoyed more is what I ended up getting into, and that was writing people's experiences. So they tell me what they experienced in the paranormal, and I would put it to pen and paper and eventually get an article out on the website.
Do you enjoy the paranormal? Is it something that after 17 years of investigating that it still makes you feel like it's something that you need to do? It's something that you still engross yourself with?
100%. Oh yeah, I absolutely love it. There's nothing like telling a great ghost story. So today, when I actually lead the tours myself, we have other storytellers and professional actors, but you know, I make sure to get out there and do it whenever I can, because I don't know, just because I've had experiences over the years, and even though I'm always skeptical first, when something real happens or somebody tells me a story that just seems absolutely legit, yeah, there's nothing like that feeling. So I haven't lost my excitement for it.
Ghost tours are becoming highly popular around North America these days because it gives people who may not want to be a part of an investigation a chance to experience maybe a little bit of history that they've either forgotten or never knew about their communities, whether it's a metropolis like Toronto or a very small town on the Gold Rush Trail like mine in British Columbia. When you talked to people before you started the tour, what was the reaction in Toronto regarding the paranormal? Is it normally known as a haunted city, or is it so upbeat and 2017 that people just don't really pay attention to it?
You know, in the city of Toronto, it's more of a different feel. Yes, big city, you get the tourists who come in, and it's almost like just an experience for them. So from the city's angle itself, they know that they're historic, and they know that some locations like the Mackenzie House or the Elgin and Winter Garden Theatre, Old City Hall, have some amazing ghost stories that have been proven over the years. But for a feeling of a haunted city, I would say Hamilton steps out more. And as in haunted town, nothing beats Niagara on the Lake. I mean, that place is just different when it comes to ghost stories.
And we're going to get into all of them tonight in regards to it, but when it comes to Toronto being it is considered a very modern city in the world and one of the most beautiful on the planet. Us in Vancouver would say we're better when it comes to that, but that's just us. It's the whole East versus West thing. You know how that goes around this country because we can't stand the Maple Leafs, and yet our Canucks have never won a Stanley Cup. Yes, it does go that far, our American listeners. It really does. Everything revolves around hockey around here for the most part. But when it comes down to the city being haunted, do you think because there's a lot of immigration, there's a lot of business, there's a lot of hustle and bustle around Toronto, is it more a sense that people have forgotten the city's history because it does go back a couple hundred years to the inception of Canada?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think historical tours in general have kind of been pushed off to the side a little bit. And actually, that's another reason why ghost walks are so amazing. And I don't know about other ghost walks, but I've always made sure that I put that history connection, that every single ghost story ever told in history has a connection to history itself. And that's, that doesn't change for any location. But yeah, when it comes to the history of the city itself, I do think some people have forgotten.
So when you look at it, and I remember as a kid in elementary school having to read the book The Lost Treasures of Casa Loma. And that was a book that was kind of famous here in Canada in regards to buildings being haunted or mysterious, much like the Winchester House in the United States. Are a lot of these attractions still around, and are people just bypassing them, Dan, or are they taking the time to investigate the city's rich history?
Like Casa Loma is a great example when it comes to the history. I mean, if your listeners don't know what it looks like, I highly recommend just do a quick Google search for it now. It is a beautiful house. The guy who built it went bankrupt because he made it so big and so grand he couldn't afford it anymore. So really, his family didn't get a chance to live in the house, which is a double-edged sword because it's a great piece of history, but you don't get a lot of ghost stories because it wasn't lived in. So really what you have over the years of the history of the house is mostly just the tourists who've come in and out. But as for the lesser-known historic locations in Toronto, I've heard over the years that numbers tend to go down. But what I do like to hear is that schools are always interested in these places and having the kids come out and take tours whenever possible.
Not to be political or anything, but Toronto is a highly multicultural society. And do you think with the increase of immigration that has caused maybe a little bit of the lost history? I know that's happened here on the West Coast with Vancouver.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. The tours are done, of course, in English. And, with smaller businesses, it's always hard to expand out and offer tours in different languages. That might be one of the reasons why there's a wall up. It could be because of the language barrier.
So do you find that around southern Ontario, where a lot of the hauntings are happening, do you find that it is most haunted closer to Lake Ontario than it is inland?
Well, the reason why you'll have more ghost stories closer to the lake is because when the Loyalists came up from the United States and founded this area, this is where all the history happened. They stayed close to the lake and founded their cities there. So anything along what we call the Golden Horseshoe, which is Niagara right around to Toronto, is going to have all the history, because that's where the loyalists set up their camps and eventually towns.
Do you feel that the paranormal in Ontario is very underwhelmed? It's something that I've noticed here on the West Coast, and a lot of Canadian people whom I have talked to, that they never want to talk about the paranormal, but they always seem to have an interest. Is it the same thing there, or is the paranormal kind of bypassed over as one of those weird things that people do?
I think, not to get political on my side, but Canada is more of a secular country, which means some superstition gets pushed aside. And, I know Mike has probably had this experience as well, is when you tell people you're a paranormal investigator, they tend to get a little bit of a smirk. Some people will think it's kind of a joke. And as I mentioned, I've always been skeptical first. If something happens that's supposedly ghostly, I will go through every means to try and disprove it. And even with that, over the last 17 years, I still had a handful of experiences that I couldn't disprove. So it's been like one of my main goals. Every event and every ghost walk I've ever run is I always ask people, who are the skeptics? Who are the ones who don't believe? And then I have a little discussion with them, and I try and bring them over to my way of thinking.
I find over here that people will laugh, mock at you, but then they have a ghost story to tell you right after. That's something that happened to me. Yeah, I like those experiences too, definitely.
Do you find that, since people kind of look at the paranormal research as one of those quirky things that odd people do you find that your research gets taken very seriously?
In what way? You mean seriously?
In the public, or like credibility-wise?
Oh, I see. When in my experience, I was more on the story side. I've been witness to many investigations and been part of quite a few over the years. And what I've seen is when people post their experiences on their websites, most of the time, and I could be wrong about this, is you won't get folks outside of the paranormal community reading these results. It might happen every now and then, but I don't think it's a popular thing to do. It's mostly people who are kind of in the community that take part.
What is the paranormal scene like in Ontario? Are there a lot of groups out there investigating?
Not so much anymore. I've always kept my finger on the pulse of that community over the years, because I've just been fascinated by it, and I have friends who are still into paranormal groups, but they don't do like investigations in residential homes anymore. I'm not sure when it shifted, but back when we started out in 2000, there was tons of them. I mean, so many paranormal groups, and then over the years they grew and they left. And today in Ontario, I really don't know of any fully active groups who still will offer investigations to residential homes or even businesses.
Do you find that there are a lot of people who live in haunted places in Toronto? Because if it's anything like Vancouver, and I'll be honest with you, the only time I've ever been to Toronto was catching connector flights into the East Coast. I've never been in the city to view it, mainly because, I'm a Yankee fan and I'm a Canucks and Oilers fan, and the whole rivalry that the country has. But do you find, is it like Vancouver, where a lot of these historic old homes that are 100 years old are being bulldozed over for condominiums and high-rises and giant houses that really is, maybe shifting the city from, having these historic homes to having everything looking new?
Ooh. First off, I'm sorry to hear what's happening in Vancouver. There's never an excuse to bulldoze a historic home. And I have that point of view because of the fact that I guess Ontario must have some strong laws, because, if a house is historic, especially if it's deemed historic by Ontario Heritage, there's also protections that come along with that. There's games that some developers will attempt to play. They used to do that like crazy here in Hamilton before Hamilton started becoming booming again. But no, Toronto and Ottawa, especially in Ottawa, if you have a historic house, not only can you not bulldoze it, but you have to be careful what you build in front of it so that it keeps its original view. So I actually think Ontario must have very strict laws.
So when it comes to the paranormal, do you get a lot of phone calls from people, since there aren't many groups in the Toronto area investigating? Do you get a lot of calls for cases, whether it's in haunted older buildings or historic homes?
I've gotten a few emails. Technically, I mean, to be completely fair, the website that we have up is mostly just for the tours, and we do articles of famous ghost stories. But as for doing a call out to do investigations, there's nothing on there for it. So when I do get a message coming through about somebody having a haunting in their home, it's more rare than you would think. And I'll answer them. I'll try and answer any questions. But for setting up an investigation, as I mentioned, there really isn't any groups that do it actively at the moment.
Why do you think there is such a lack of paranormal teams in the Toronto area? I mean, you would think in an area of Toronto, I believe it's 8.5 million people in Toronto alone. You think there would be a heck of a lot more interest in this field of study.
I agree, and there are, like, if you were to do a search in Google or look through Facebook, there are groups out there, paranormal investigative groups that exist. But as for doing homes, at least from my point of view, I haven't come across many of them who still do that. I don't know if it's for liability reasons or maybe there isn't as much of an interest anymore. But I couldn't tell you which way that goes.
So when you're out investigating, tell us about your team. Never mind the ghost tours just yet, but do you have a paranormal team?
I still have original ones that I worked with back in the day. Technically, I haven't done an official investigation since the year 2004, switching over and doing the business full time. But I did keep contacts with psychics who I trust very much, who have been put through the ringer and proven that they're the real deal, and some scientific thinkers who, like one fellow named Nick, any photograph that you would give him that could be a potential ghost, and he'll go off on a tangent about, oh no, that's just the way the light is coming in a certain angle, or how you have the camera pointed, or it's the dust bouncing off the flash, and you just ruins everybody's dreams. But I just try and keep a good contact with them, so if ever there's an event, and we sometimes do hunts for the public, they can come along and take part.
Mm-hmm. So what was the purpose of shutting down your own personal investigations? Just not enough action going on?
For me personally, I just kind of lost my taste for it. It wasn't, I wasn't always big on it. As I mentioned, they were a little bit too long for my taste. It was nice to just get people's experiences after the fact. So I kind of stepped back as the coordinator for that. And, the people we were involved with kind of spanned out and did their own thing.
Do you ever do the old battlefield sites, like where the Battle of York was or anything like that? Do they remain still, any of them?
Yeah, there's some battlefields still. I've done events at Fort York, which is the one in Toronto. And I know a little bit. I don't know too much about the ghosts there. But there's also a battlefield park in Stony Creek, where the Battle of Stony Creek happened. And I know a couple of experiences. That's a pretty haunted place. And, of course, out in Niagara on the lake, which is, the place for the War of 1812, and Fort George and Fort Mississauga and Queenston Heights. It's all a ton of energy in that space.
What kind of stuff have you had happen at the lake?
So for example, Fort George, probably one of the most haunted places is a certain type of energy about it, even though that it's not the original buildings anymore. Because if you know your history, you know that Fort George was destroyed when the Americans invaded during the War of 1812. They burnt the entire fort, and all that was left over was the powder magazine because they didn't want to blow themselves up. But afterwards, in the 1920s, they built a replica. And it's funny how if you put a replica there and the energy still remains. But from what I can remember is anywhere from seeing soldiers in a tunnel that leads up to where you walk up the stairs and you can get above the earthworks. And as well, Barracks number 1 supposedly has a really negative spirit. And I know when I was on a tour there, I saw something in the window of Barracks number 1, like it's just a really quick flash, like a guy appeared and then he disappeared. And as well, as far as going as saying if you stand in a certain spot, you can hear the battle going on around you.
Why do you think that battlefield is not as built up as, say, Gettysburg was? Because it was a huge point in Canadian history where a lot of Americans will not admit that they lost. And yes, that is a shot to our American audience. You lost.
Yes, okay, wait. I have to mention that because every single tour we do in Niagara on the lake, I always do a little disclaimer at the beginning saying that, we're very British and very Canadian, and that's the point of view we're giving. But I you know what, to be nice to the Americans, I also see their point of view because from where we're standing, yes, they lost. They came up here to try and take over what was Upper Canada, now Ontario, and the British ended up pushing them out. But from their point of view, when the British went down to Washington to get revenge for the burning of Niagara on the lake, yes, they did get to Washington, but they didn't burn the town and eventually were forced out. So if you look at it from that point of view, then yes, they won on their turf and we won on our turf.
I prefer our version better. That's just me.
That works for me.
Yeah, exactly. They lost. Your White House got burned. Anyways, wave the Union Jack back then, my friends. Now the Maple Leaf. But nonetheless, I mean, Canada, I'm going to explain to people, and maybe I would like you to chime in on this, Dan, if you don't mind. But America is so proud of their history and everything that they have done. They're very, I realize a lot of people down there, because of the political strains that are going on, will say, well, I'm not proud, I'm not this, I'm not that. But for the most part, America really celebrates their history. And I think that's what a lot of Canadians don't get, because we're over the last 30 years, become such a multicultural society that we've kind of given up on history to start a new type of history in the last 30 years. A lot of people will say, it's wrong. A lot of people say that's what Canada is all about, and that's the great debate up here. But do you think that we do enough as Canadians to really take care of these historic sites and to remember what has happened on Canadian land as this country was forged leading into 1867?
Yeah, yes to the first, no to the second. So yes to the fact that we take care of our historic sites, at least in Ontario. I'm not sure what's happening in Vancouver, but I know in Ontario they are pretty dedicated to taking care of history and historic sites. As for the no, and this is my personal opinion as a storyteller and as leading the ghost walks, that I think historic locations can do a better job of telling our history. So if you go into a museum, for example, they might tell you what type of wood the wall was made of and how much, this brick cost. But they're not going to tell you, about the party that happened in the room because they were celebrating pending nuptials, or the tragedy that happened, or in the parlor over there was a wake, when one of the family members died. They're not going to tell you those personal experiences. And if you try and drag it out of them, it's almost like the guides don't even know. So from that point of view, I do think that they're failing.
I know around here, being on the Gold Rush Trail where I was, and for everybody who doesn't know on the East Coast, the Gold Rush Trail started in California, went through on this trajectory through the northern part of Nevada, and then Washington State, or Oregon, then Washington State, then into British Columbia, eventually up to the Yukon and Alaska. And this was a very, very lawless type land during that part, in regards to the history. I mean, people today, if they take out their metal detectors, they'll still find all sorts of things in the hills here. Is it much the same in Ontario, that the history is still lying underground?
Somewhat. I think that mostly here it would be native history. For example, we do a tour at a place called Ruthven up in Cayuga, and this is Haldeman, so it's near where the Six Nations Reserve is. And anywhere that you go there, you start digging, you could find arrowheads. And even around Ruthven, when they did an archaeological dig, they found so many artifacts, and they also found old foundations for longhouses. So yeah, definitely up here would be more from the native angle.
I want to focus more in now, because we're going to talk a lot in hour number 2 about your ghost tours and the different towns and cities that you do this in. What led you to start the ghost tours?
It's just, it all went around my love for telling these stories. I was always have a fascination with ghosts and with history. And yeah, like I said, being a paranormal investigator didn't really sit well with me. So when I was a child, I wanted to be a writer, and I always loved telling a great story, and it just it felt natural. So I fell into it after telling a few on the website, and then thinking, hey, I got all these great ghost stories. I might as well, start doing tours.
So when you decided to start on the tours, how did this come about?
So it started with Hamilton. I actually live in downtown Hamilton, so that's kind of my home base. And it started with the downtown Hamilton tour, and just all these wonderful historic buildings, and our connection to the famous serial killer Jack the Ripper, and it's just stories that are just so over the top and so dark. It kind of drew me into it.
Do you allow people to investigate when you're doing the tours, or do you guys investigate while doing the tours?
It's a different type of event. So if we do a ghost walk, it's, walk to this location, tell the history, tell the ghost stories, then to the next location. There really isn't a point where you could do an investigation without disturbing the stories or disturbing the rest of the group. But over the years, I've held what we call ghost hunts at different haunted locations throughout the city.
What has been the reaction of people on your tour?
It really depends on the people, but some of the locations we do are more secluded. Like we have one location that's up in the woods of Ancaster, so it's the ruins of an old mansion. It's called the Hermitage, and things have happened on the tour, like people seeing lights out in the dark woods, or hearing noises, hearing voices from the trees. And when something happens that nobody can explain, I don't care if you're skeptic or not, you're going to react to it.
How many people do you take on the tour per night?
It depends on the location and time of year. And in one tour group for a guide, you might have upwards of 25 to 30 people. And then some nights, especially around Halloween when it gets really busy, for example, the one Hermitage night, we had 9 tours in an evening.
How many people take place in that? Like, do you cap your tours?
Depending. Like, on an extremely busy night at a big location like the Hermitage, you could see anywhere from 250 to 300. Smaller locations, maybe upwards of 50 to 100 on really busy nights.
So take us through the tour. What do you call it?
How do you mean?
Like, what do you call your tour?
So it's just the ghost walks.
Oh, okay. So keep it nice and simple.
Exactly.
And what has been the reaction of the people who take part in these tours? Because I know in my tour, a lot of people are expecting to see what they see on TV, and they're actually quite amazed that it's nothing like what they are viewing on television. Do you get a lot of that as well?
Now, when you say by what they see on TV, you mean like in like Ghost Hunters or Paranormal State, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I hadn't had too many people come out with that point of view. I've had a lot of people come out who expect it to be like a haunted house, like they're going to walk down and then something like somebody dressed up with a spooky mask is going to jump out and yell boo at them. And rarely are they disappointed when I tell them that it's not going to happen that way. But for the most part, the ghost hunts that we did were more like the TV shows, as where the ghost walks, as I explain on the website, is try to be as clear as possible to tell them that these are just tours.
I notice on our ghost tour that we do here, and we've been getting bigger and bigger. We have a soft cap at 20 people, but we've had as many as 54 over the night on our heritage site where we investigate 3 different buildings that are on the site. Mike has been there, and he knows, and he has actually stated that it's probably one of the most haunted locations in this province, and they're always active. Do you find that on the tour when the people are there that they're excited or a little bit freaked out? Because we get kind of a mixture of people's reactions as to what they are expecting.
Yeah, it really does. The location does change the way people see it and what they expect. So, for example, if I have them coming out to downtown Hamilton or to Niagara Lake or Toronto, they're not going to expect fearful, secluded location at night where it's just them in the group alone in the woods, for example, as where the Hermitage, that's exactly what they're going to get. So, the Hermitage especially, because when it's dark, you can't even see the path. It's just pitch black. And knowing that they have to walk down that path and how haunted that place has been over the generations. I've had a few people, sometimes, little kids who start crying and they refuse to go. And sometimes adults who just, they don't want to go down the path at night.
We have a lot of that here too, because we tell people in our pre-tour speech, and our final tour of the year is this Saturday. We tell people, not to expect what they see on television. We can't guarantee any type of results, but what we can guarantee is an experience of learning about the history and potentially the spirits taking part in that storytelling. Do you do something similar along those lines so the crowd or your participants know that, there is a chance that nothing may happen? It's really dependent on if the spirit wants to connect or not.
Yeah, in a way. I don't do any speeches at the beginning calling attention to that. I more just assume that they understand that that's the case. But I have had people come to me and ask, are you going to guarantee that something ghostly would occur? And I always use the same joke. I'm sure my friends and workers are tired of hearing it. I always say if I could make something ghostly happen for them, then I'd be a millionaire and I wouldn't be leading the tours anymore. But overall, I just, there's no speech at the beginning. I just assume they understand what they're getting into.
Well, when you're having 250, 300 people a tour, it's kind of hard to gather everybody together. You almost need a megaphone or something along those lines in order to get that message across, so I can understand that. So take us through the tour. Let's start in the one in Toronto, and eventually we'll move on to the other ones, because I do want to get into some ghost stories with you in hour number 2. But when you're on the tour, take us through the paces of what happens.
So, for example, I'll use the Toronto Centre Ghost Walk as a good example, and that goes through a very dense historic area in the city of Toronto, starting with a building known as Old City Hall. So you'll have our tour guide standing out in the front by one of the lampposts, dressed out in their full costume, the nice old Victorian cape, and we use replica hurricane lanterns with real fire inside, so you get that nice little image of history as you're walking up. And then, starting with Old City Hall, for example, every single piece of history and every single story, ghost or not, that we tell has a flow to it. So from beginning to end at Old City Hall, you're going to go through the history, into the ghost stories, back to the history, into the ghost stories, into the dark history behind it, and it's all going to flow perfectly in order so that it's, easier to listen to, and that you get the best effect, and that you can visualize it as it's going along. And then, after you do one stop at Old City Hall, then you'll walk down a pathway to a hidden historic and haunted house just behind the Eaton Center that nobody knows about, the Scatting House, and then through there, and eventually the Mackenzie House and St. Michael's Hospital and the Elgin and Winter Garden Theater. So it's really just a kind of tour. Landmarks are featured, and history and ghost stories.
When you are going through the tour and you're telling people about the rich heritage that's there, do you find that the ghosts actually walk along with you?
As in, are there experiences happening to the group?
Yes, because I know on our tour, we'll actually get ghosts following us in certain buildings.
What do you see?
If we're upstairs, say in the Clydesdale barn, we'll have what we call the Shadow Man watching over us, watching over the tour. He's been seen a number of times. We'll hear, for instance, if the tour is downstairs in the Clydesdale barn, we'll hear footsteps running to the stairwell to almost come down and check out who we are following the tour. Yeah. In the main house, we have a little girl in there who loves to hang out and play with the people. Nice. She's been known to give hugs. Yeah, things like that.
Very cool. Yeah, no, we've had experiences over the years. It's not so much they're following along as for some reason it could be that it's a full moon or it's an anniversary or something that just kind of increases the energy at a location. And we've had things that have moved around during nights of the tours, and we've noticed it. Or at one location we used to do, there was a cat that haunted the place, and people in the tour would jump because it felt like a cat just rubbed up against their leg. But usually it's more of a random thing. They don't happen all the time.
We have a cat, a ghost cat in the main house of our tour as well.
Very cool.
I'm very interested in you saying that because, when we look for spirits, we're always looking for people. We tend to forget about the animals as well that were around. So it's kind of intriguing that people are having cat experiences on your tour as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally believe that the energies of animals can be just as strong as the energies of people, after death. I had at that same location during one of our tours. One of our guides, James, was standing on the grand staircase in this old building, this old custom house. And we had somebody in the group actually yell to James. He said, it's behind you. And when you hear that in a haunted building, you move. And James, he spun around and he said he saw this black blob on the stair, and it ran up the stairs. So he gave his lantern to somebody in front of him and ran after it. And when he got to the top of the stairs, he was met with 2 closed doors and no cats. So it had disappeared. But yeah, no, definitely animal spirits are just as strong.
Have you ever experienced any other animal spirits besides the cat?
Yeah, a couple times. One, there's a place known as the Blue Ghost Tunnel. This is in Thorold, which is near Niagara Falls. And it's an old train tunnel where there was an accident, and it's got some real negative energy about it. So we were down there, and in the tunnel, I was the first to notice at the opening, it looked like a dog was walking back and forth. And so I told everybody, I said, look, and they all saw it, and we ran towards the opening, and as we got closer and closer, it was almost as it just kind of faded away and disappeared in front of us. And I would also find out from other people who have been there that they've seen the dog too.
We sometimes have horses in the Clydesdale barn neighing from the stalls. I haven't heard it personally, but I know investigators who've gone in there who have. Do you find that even on the outside of the buildings that you were investigating, even on the land, that there seems to be animal activity?
Yeah, or at the Hermitage ruins, people have mentioned that. Mostly like seeing animals in the trees when they're walking down this thing. They might see glowing eyes staring out at the pathway at night. As for other locations, I mean, a lot are in city centers, so even if there were animal spirits, it'd be very subtle, so you couldn't pick up on it. Otherwise, it is mostly in buildings.
So take us through, as we got about 5 minutes here before we got to go to break. Let's start with the Toronto tour. You know, Toronto being such a large city, one of the largest in North America, how do you possibly get a tour going around so many different locations that are haunted that would be spread out?
That's why, you got to kind of stick. There's these pockets of ghost stories that have been collected over the years by authors and websites. The area around Yonge Dundas Square, which is where the Toronto Centre tour happens, is definitely one of those pockets. And I've also created a tour up at, I call it Toronto North, which starts in front of the beautiful Queen's Park building, our legislative building, and then goes through the University of Toronto and all those historic places. So there are these wonderful little pockets that can be focused on for decent tours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you set up a location, how far in advance are you doing these locations? Like how far in advance are you setting them up?
For the most part, if it's a brand new tour, I have a bit of a creative process. I'll go out. Well, first research is done. All of the stories are collected. All of the history is collected. You visit the historic libraries and the special collections, and you go through all that, talk to local businesses, talk to historians, and then once everything is there, it's more just a feeling of writing out the script and, showing the experiences in the best light. And then I'll actually spend a month doing free tours every now and then just so I can, say them out loud to actual people and engage reactions. So within that entire process, then we end up with, anywhere from an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half tour.
What is the reaction from, say, the politicians or the historians in your community about you doing this?
It really depends on the person, to be completely honest. Some of them are very supportive. I know in Hamilton I've had tons of support from politicians, and historians will come on my tours, and usually they're kind of impressed at the research that's gone into it. And sometimes, there's little subtleties. Like, for example, they renumbered buildings on a certain street, so we're pointing to the wrong space where a house used to exist. So they'll correct us on that. But for the most part, it is supportive. And the ones who don't really believe and don't really support usually will just ignore it.
So the ones who are supportive, have they gone on the tour themselves to check out what you do? Because I know up here, our local politicians really haven't come out to support it, but it's not that they're against it. They think it's actually a kind of cool idea.
You know what? I don't think there's any, if you mean like a stigma associated with it, where if they come out and are seen on the tour that they might look silly for going on it. But for the most part, any of the politicians have come out, or the local historians, a lot of them won't even say who they are. They'll just come out and might send an email afterwards or something. But I've never really had a lot of issue with that.
So is your tour picking up in popularity then amongst not only the tourists, but with the locals as well?
Definitely, Hamilton doesn't have a big tourist population. It's getting better, but Hamilton has always been a city that a lot of people have avoided when it comes to tourism. So for this city, it's 100% local interest, or people coming from Toronto or Niagara because they're curious. As for Niagara on the Lake and Toronto, you are going to be dealing with a high level of tourism and probably much lower with locals.
Well, I mean, let's face it. Not everybody likes the Tiger Cats. So I can see why not wanting to go to Hamilton or something along that line. So for people who don't know, Hamilton would be the equivalent of Pittsburgh. It's Canada's steel city, much like Pittsburgh's known as Steel Town as well. So, the CFL, the Canadian Football League rivalries do run strong around these parts. And I know Ron in Saskatchewan in the chat room, he's probably got his watermelon on because the Saskatchewan Roughriders are still in the playoffs. So I mean it does run wild. You guys hold on one second. We're going to hop out for our first break of the night here on Spaced Out Radio. Mike Morin from Haunted Crew of Canada battling a cold, but he's sticking with it. We are joined by Daniel Cumerlato. His website, ghostwalks.com, where you can tour Toronto, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Hamilton. If you ever make it up there, this is a tour to do. Looks great. They even dress the part. Tell you, Dan looks good in a top hat. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little jealous. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with hour number 2 right after this.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Morin. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience, Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Jamie Sexton is back with Rebel Planet News. We're going to get an update on Las Vegas and other strange and weird stories going on in the alternative media, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on KTLK, the Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, and I think he set it because I mentioned his Toronto Maple Leafs. Oh, this is painful. Anti-transubstantiation... I'm not even going to say it. Anti-transubstantiationist or something along those lines. I'm not even going to try it, Cardwell. You got me tonight. Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also join us for live chat in the SOR Space Travelers group. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. We have a brand new YouTube channel called Spaced Out Radio. It is no longer Spaced Out Radio Show, so we're asking unsubscribe from that one. Come on over to the new one. We would appreciate that. And you can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live, tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. Great videos from UFO seekers and Contact TV. And read up on the latest news on the Encounter online, where everything is up to date. Tonight we are talking with Mike Morin from Haunted Crew of Canada. He's battling the flu, so he's in and out, but he will be with us for at least one more hour, along with, for the next hour, Daniel Cumerlato, who runs ghostwalks.com, a ghost tour out of Toronto, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Daniel, we start with you, and I want to break down this tour a little bit, and we're going to start in Toronto, where you are located, I believe. Tell us about what you go through on the tour and what people can expect.
So, I mentioned the Toronto Centre tour about, the area that it goes around. With the one that goes on in the north, as I mentioned, you have these pockets of historic areas, and it's amazing. So Queen's Park, which is Ontario's legislative building, this beautiful old structure, starts right in front of there, and that place is quite a bit haunted. And then going through the U of T campus and the old original buildings from the early 1800s and the history and legends that go along with that.
So when you're taking the tour, what are some of the stories you share with your people who take part?
Yeah, it really, for the most part, when we have a ghost story or a ghost experience conveyed to us, part of the legitimacy of it is when somebody talks about their experience, they're the ones that it happened to, and there's details involved. They're not just saying, I was in a room and the light flipped on in the other room and I saw the light was on. No, there's more detail to it. I lived in this location and, I saw an apparition. I believe it was this person, and that's the energy that's been picked up on as psychics who went through the building. So there's a certain type of detail that's got to get added to it. And how that detail comes apart, I'll give you a great example. Queen's Park, started the Toronto North Tour. We talk about a couple of the main ghosts in the building, and I always use an example of here's an over-the-top ghost story, and here's a more subtle, realistic one. So the over-the-top talks about these women who have been seen in the basement of the building, Now, before Queen's Park was there, it was an insane asylum that was on the same lands. And it was an insane asylum for women. So they say that these ghosts in the basement are connected to that. And one of the ghosts will turn away from you, and then she disappears because she's very shy. Another ghost will run up to you and put her hands on your chest to get your attention because she's desperate to get out of her prison, and then she disappears. And another ghost is hanging from a hook. It's very over the top, and I always find it's kind of hard to believe. And then there's the other one where they do tours at Halloween time, and they were walking a tour group through. It's late at night, about 15 people on the tour, and a person in the back of the group yells out to the guide, "I just saw someone in an empty chamber room," and I believe that he said his name was John. Now, this is great, because the tour guide, knowing the history of the building, then immediately pipes up and says, yeah, wait a minute, there is a ghost. There's a ghost in that chamber room, and his name is John, and he's John Rutherford. So then it goes into the history of this guy. He was fought in World War I for Canada. He was at the Battle of Somme, and he got injured, and he healed just in time to fight at Vimy Ridge. And he's a huge Canadian hero. He's got so many medals. And after he was done, he served at Queen's Park, so he continued to serve his country, and he loved being in Queen's Park. And that was one of the main reasons why they believe he still remained. So here you have a perfect example of a legitimate ghost story that starts out with a subtle experience and then just dives right into the history.
Are the ghosts very active on the tour? Are they maybe touching shoulders, pulling hair, or trying to get involved with the people out of curiosity?
It is more rare on these tours. I'm not sure why to have those types of experiences, unless you get psychics. If you get psychics in the group, then much more will occur because they're more sensitive to the energy. But we do have random experiences. I'll give you a great example. This happened at the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in Hamilton, and it was Halloween time. Halloween is when the veil is the thinnest, and that's when the energy is really raised. And on one of the nights, whenever I go into the old house in the building, I always do a walkthrough with one of the security guards to make sure everything's open and ready to go. And on the first walkthrough, we were going through a sacred room to the Masons. It was called the robing room. It's where they get into their costumes for their rituals. And the first time we go through, I noticed one of the cabinet doors on the left-hand side, it was opened up, and there were two helmets sitting in the middle of the floor. Your listeners will probably know if I say German Kaiser helmets with the spikes sticking out of the top. That's what they look like. So I look at the security guy. I'm like, that they shouldn't be there. The Masons are usually meticulous about this. So we pick them up, put them in the cabinet. I personally latched that cabinet. And during the first tour I led through on that night, I didn't expect this. So I come down the stairs, I come into the robing room, and I look up, and to my surprise, the same cabinet door I latched earlier is open again, wide open, and just one of those helmets is sitting perfectly in the middle of the floor. So I didn't say anything to the group, because at this point I didn't want them to think I was crazy. Maybe I was wrong. So I pick it up and I put it back in and I latch the cabinet again. And during my second and last tour of the night that I was doing, I almost expected it at this point. So I come down the stairs, come around the corner, and there it is. Cabinets wide open, and the original two helmets are sitting perfectly in the middle of the floor. So this time I put them back in, and I told the group exactly what had been happening. And I latched up the cabinet, and I was very happy that was my last tour of the night.
Do the ghosts like the tour?
I'm sorry?
Do you find, or do you know if the ghosts that are part of the tour actually enjoy the tour?
Oh, you know what? I do have an example for that. Normally we don't get too much feedback from the other side, but this one wasn't really. This was also in the Scottish Rite, because I was having a weird experience for many different tours over the months, whenever I walked from the first floor of the Tuckett's mansion, which is part of that tour, and up to the second floor, when I was telling the ghost stories, I was always out of breath. And I didn't know why. I just couldn't catch my breath for the life of me, and I was just struggling to tell the story. Happened many times. And then I went into the same house to tape for a local TV show out of Toronto. And the psychic they brought in, this guy, he's amazing. And when we went up to the second floor, before he heard anything, he says to me, "Oh, the woman of the house," which he didn't know a woman was haunting him, and he was right. "The woman of the house wants to tell you to just breathe." So that was a perfect example that told me that, yes, they were watching. But as for feedback on whether they're enjoying the stories, haven't heard too much of that.
We have a mixture of spirits here that actually either really like the tour or they don't enjoy it at all whatsoever. We have one spirit in particular in our one building, and Mike knows who he is. His name is Willie, who can't stand the tour. He thinks it's childish. He'll almost go to say that it's a little inhumane that, you know, we are doing this tour and trying to get the ghost to do something stupid like knock on walls or something along those lines. And he has at times been very vicious with his approach on things. Do you have any ghosts that you know of that are very, you know, unfriendly towards patrons of the tour?
Actually, you know what, as you were telling that really creepy story there, I did remember something that does stand out. That the location I mentioned earlier with the cat, the old custom house, which is a very energetic place, is haunted by a spirit known as the Dark Lady. And a poem was written about her back in the 1800s, makes her the city's most oldest known ghost. And when we were doing investigations there, for 2 months straight, the building just didn't feel right. I mean, we had, it was like a horrible negative energy, and on a couple nights, weird things would happen, like me going out to the car to get a couple of bags. And as I'm walking back from inside the empty building, somebody turned the deadbolt lock. So I had engaged the lock to keep the door propped open, and somebody turned it so that the door would close and lock me out. Thank God I had the keys, otherwise I'd be in big trouble. And on the same night, the elevator stopped working, so then 30 people in our group had to stand the entire evening. And also during that time, we had an issue with, unfortunately, the only name for it is possession, even though it's not what you see in the movie The Exorcist. Real possession is definitely not as dramatic, but you had groups during our seances where young girls between the age of 16 to 21 would start shaking uncontrollably, the kind of shaking you might do if you were sick, like Mike, where you couldn't control it, and it wasn't something that they could fake. So our psychics knew exactly what was going on. They'd jump into action, and they would clear the negative energy before it got out of hand. And on one night, it happened 3 times in a row, and I was fed up. So I asked a group of willing participants to make a little circle around me, and we did a session where we communicated with the spirit. And my one and only question for her was, "Why are you so angry?" And the answer that I got back was poem. She doesn't like the poem. So it's such a simple answer, because inside this poem about the Dark Lady, it describes her as the devil, saying she's like 7 feet high and horns sticking out her head, and she has hooves for feet. And I don't know any woman who would like that description. So the minute she said poem, I immediately understood what she meant. And I promised her, I said, I promise, from this night forth, we will never tell that poem on any of the tours we do in the building again. And as one final goodbye before things calmed again, I heard the noise from behind me, and a 16-year-old girl snuck in the circle when I wasn't looking. She ran out the front door of the building and threw up. And that was like the final negative energy that happened, because that day forth we didn't tell the poem.
And really, with a lot of these spirits, don't you find that it's really touch and go with what they're going to accept and what they are not going to accept? Because it's a real learning curve and a real learning process, isn't it?
It's true. Yeah, you kind of have to be accepted into their space.
Did you find acceptance with this lady then?
Oh God, no! No, she hated my guts right to the very end. After the museum that runs the building decided they wanted to go a different angle where they didn't want to be associated with the ghosts anymore because it was quite popular. They were more going to be doing weddings and that kind of stuff. So we ended up stopping the tours for that reason. But no, right up to the very end, I would hear from psychics who went through the building that the Dark Lady does not like me at all.
Wait, they cut off the tour because it was popular? Or gaining popularity? Heaven forbid, heaven forbid if it's bringing popularity, which brings money into their facility.
God, man, Dave, you are preaching to the choir. I am 100% agree with you on that, but I don't know if there's an issue like that, over your way, but, in Hamilton and even Toronto and most parts, the popularity of ghost tours is more shunned than anything else.
Up here, it's something new that people had never really done or discussed. We just kind of threw it together to help raise money for our museum because it is nonprofit. And, it's been a resounding success. And I think the luck behind our tour, where we have had a lot of success with it, is because in our area, it is a very German immigrant area, and a lot of German people believe in the afterlife, and they believe in ghosts and spirits growing up back in the old country. So I think we have it a little bit easier than what it sounds like you have over there. I mean, I just can't comprehend how a business would even want to shut that down if it's bringing in extra money. I mean, that's like a restaurant saying, we're going to shut down early tonight because we just don't want to sell any more food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never fully understood. I don't know if it's because maybe a lot of the locations are museums and maybe they're receiving enough in government grants, or they do really well with weddings and they're afraid that, people who run weddings might be turned away by the idea of it being haunted. Although, to be honest, I've had most situations where that's the opposite, that people actually book haunted locations for their weddings because it's unique.
Well, let's skip out of the attitude of Toronto then, and let's move over to Niagara-on-the-Lake. You say this is probably one of the most haunted places in all of Ontario. What makes it so haunted?
You know what, this is going to go down to our rivalry with the East and the West, but I personally call Niagara-on-the-Lake Canada's most haunted town. I say for the entire country, and I have a reason for that. It's because, the great history dating back to the mid-1700s and, the Loyalists coming over after the American Revolution and then the War of 1812. I mean, it's right on the borderline, so it affected that town in a different way than any other town throughout Canada. And then even going up to today, and with that history and the energy and Fort George and Fort Mississauga and the old town, and the fact that there's 2 ghost walks and a book just written about the ghosts for a town of about 20,000 people, Niagara-on-the-Lake really for the country of Canada is a different animal.
So with its rich history in Canadian history there, tell us about the tour. Where do you go? What are the buildings like? Because for the majority of us, we probably haven't been there.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with it, everybody knows Niagara Falls. It's about maybe a 20-minute, beautifully scenic drive along the Niagara River from the falls. It's the more historic area because it's on the very tip at the mouth of the Niagara River in Lake Ontario. So the town itself started out as Upper Canada's capital before that was moved to Toronto at the beginning of the war. And during the War of 1812 was attacked because it was the capital, was taken over by the Americans, And when they retreated after the Battle of Stony Creek and the British were coming back for it, they burned the entire town. And, a certain type of dark history that remains because of it. And we feature the old town, so all the different historic buildings, which also include that history of what happened before those buildings were even built.
Who are some of the ghosts that you have figured out that are still roaming that town?
A lot of famous historical figures. One of the most known in the town is Captain Swayze at the Angel Inn. So he was a British soldier, and legend states, this is a legend, that he stayed back after the British retreated and the Americans took over the town. And nobody knows 100% sure why he stayed back. My personal guess is that it was for love, because one of the stories is he wanted to make sure his girlfriend got out okay. Now, he's waiting at the side where the Angel Inn is located, and his girlfriend doesn't show up. So maybe her family dragged her out of town. Either way, he's there, and soldiers, American soldiers, see him. So they chase him, and he runs into the building. And when they go in, they think, oh, where's the best place somebody could hide? Well, everybody knows you hide in the basement. So they go down into the basement, and it's rum barrels. And these are big enough a man can hide inside. So the Americans are going around the room. They're shaking the barrels. They're opening the tap because they're looking for the heavy one with no rum coming out of it. That's the one he's inside. And eventually they'll find it. They'll surround it. They'll attach their sharp bayonets to the end of the guns, and then they'll stab into the wood of the barrel. Now, they knew Swayze was dead when the open tap started running with his blood. And at that point, the only thing they could think to do, leave him inside there, because they weren't going to waste any time burying a British soldier. They had no respect for him at all. And it was only when the stench of his corpse got to be too much that they then go downstairs and they buried him in the basement, still inside the barrel. So that's the legend. And if you wanted to prove that the legend was real, you just got to ask the people who work at the Angel Inn and all the people who have stayed overnight on that second floor, and they'll tell you the type of ghost stories that happen in there. And we've heard so many over the years. In fact, there's so many we've had to cut a few out of the tour just because we had to limit the tour timing.
That's eerie. So when he appears now as a ghost, is he in his soldier's uniform? Does he appear just via noise or shuffling around? What are people hearing?
That's the funny thing. I never actually thought about that until you brought it up. But no, I don't have any experiences of people seeing his apparition full, so I couldn't tell you whether he was in his uniform or not. But as for his experiences, they are mostly auditory. So, for example, in the inn on the second floor, people have heard noises. A mother and daughter staying in one of the rooms, they said it was almost like their neighbors were purposely trying to disturb them, like opening and closing curtains. And at one point it sounded like, kids are running around in the room. And it's just horrible. But being it was a mother and daughter, they didn't want to take a chance of confronting these people. So they left it alone. And the next day they go downstairs to tell the lady at the desk how disappointed they were and how terrible their neighbors were. And as they're asking for a refund, this poor lady at the desk, her mouth is just open in shock. And when the woman's finally done talking, she calmly tells her that you were the only ones in the building and that room was empty. As well, the bathrooms in the basement, people have heard shuffling and breathing in the stalls. They just assume that there's somebody else in there. And then it stops, and they realize they're alone. And we've had women in the women's washroom, like sitting in the stall, and they hear a man walk into the room. Now, they know it's a man because of the heavy footsteps. And the guy will walk into the middle of the room, and then it's just silence. And when they come out of the stall, they're alone in the bathroom. As well as when Swayze's not happy, you might get things moving around in the bar. And the worst of the worst occasions were glasses would fly off the bar and smash on the floor, and it'd just be, kind of dangerous to be around during those times.
Is that rum barrel thing documented? 'Cause that's pretty hardcore.
It is pretty hardcore, you're right, and I wish to God it was documented, but unfortunately the Swayze story, because it happened so long ago and there wasn't much to do with records back then, in the time of the War of 1812, that it falls under the category of legend.
You're making me want to hop on a plane to go do all these investigations and all these spots. You tell the stories well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, Niagara on the Lake doesn't fall under that category of Toronto and some places in Hamilton. The Angel Inn, for example, is very open to the ghost stories. You ask any of those servers and waiters and waitresses and even the managers, they absolutely love it. And same with the other haunted locations in Niagara on the Lake. They embrace their ghost stories.
Quite the contrast from what is happening in Toronto, where you're getting so much, fight back in what you're trying to do with this tour. It seems that Niagara is a little bit more laid back and willing to accept and very proud of their heritage.
Very true as well. I think Niagara in general, with the falls and Niagara and the lake, they understand tourism on a different level. So they know that doing a ghost walk is just as legitimate tourism as having a historic tour or historic museum, or even the Shaw Festival and having theater plays. It's all to bring people into the town, and they understand that better than a lot of places.
How much more haunted do you think Niagara on the Lake is because of the popularity of Niagara Falls and the energy that comes off of those waterfalls?
That's actually a really good question. I've never really thought about it. The only problem with that thought is the fact that Niagara is one of the most historic regions in Canada, because the Loyalists founded it, back in the 1700s. So to be able to separate the energy of the history with the energy that might come off the falls would be a difficult thing to do. But even like downtown Niagara Falls, which isn't as historic as Niagara on the Lake, even there, you do get a decent amount of ghost stories. So maybe there is some proof to that.
Considering how First Nations heritage streamed right along the St. Lawrence Seaway into Lake Ontario, is there a large presence of First Nation spirit activity around?
I don't doubt that at all for a second. I would fathom a guess to say that yes, there are probably tons. And I know that the First Nations and Natives, they have a deep connection to the spiritual, and that they tell ghost stories probably even more than we tell ghost stories. The only problem is there is a bit of a separation, especially here in our region. That if you're not part of the reservation, or you're not, or you don't have native blood, that chances are you might not hear those stories, or it would be disrespectful to them for somebody like myself to tell it on the tour. We're respectful towards them when it comes to it.
Question coming in from Twitter from Andrew in Vancouver, North Vancouver. He is asking, the show Creepy Canada was a Canadian TV series which focused on paranormal stories around the country. Have you ever been approached to be a part of this or any other show?
Oh, definitely, yes. The Hermitage Ruins segment on that show was my personal experience. So that was my 15 minutes of fame right there. And as well, I was involved kind of behind the scenes with some investigations that Creepy Canada did at locations in southern Ontario.
At Niagara on the Lake, is it very much an old settlers type ghost that is walking around? Or because, let's face it, Niagara Falls has had a multitude of suicides over the years, since mankind came and discovered it, do you think that there is a real mixture of spirits from the old and maybe more present hanging around?
It's a very good question. Now, yes, I do. And I think the most vivid energy comes from history. I think because they dealt with much more tragedy, much more uncertainty back then. Creates these bursts of emotional energy, and that it leaves that impression. So for that reason, I think historic energy and ghosts is much stronger. But it doesn't mean that there isn't more modern ones. A good example will be the Royal George Theatre in Niagara-on-the-Lake. There's two spirits in there, one named Jeffrey, who was a lighting man who just loved that building so much, and another one named Nancy, who was an actress who was in the Shaw Festival for many decades, and they both haunt that place. Now, here's the other side of that coin, is that if you tell a ghost story about somebody who passed recently, it of course can be considered insensitive, especially if it was a tragedy. You don't talk about any recent events. The reason that we will talk about Jeffrey and Nancy is because in the end, it's a happy story. They're still doing what they love. That was the building they enjoyed, and that's where they remain. And a perfect example of that would be on one of our tours. I had an older woman at the back, and she approached me afterwards and said, I actually knew Nancy. She was involved with the Shaw Festival, and said that if Nancy knew you were talking about her on the ghost walk, and I was kind of bracing for the worst of the worst, and then she said, Nancy would love it. She would absolutely love that you were talking about her. So the fact that it's a happy ending, there's the sensitivity moves away. But yeah, no, from the personal point of view, I do think historic energy is much more vivid.
At Niagara-on-the-Lake, before we move on, what's your favorite ghost story from there?
Oh, that's a difficult question for me, but I'm trying to think in the sense of which one I love to tell the most. And I have to say, it's considered one of the oldest legends in North American history. And unfortunately, it's not in the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, but when you go to the gazebo by the lake, right across, you can see Fort Niagara, which is in Youngstown, New York. And this is a structure that was built by the French in 1726. And ever since then, almost 300 years ago, there was a legend in the building. So I absolutely love telling that legend of this headless French soldier that comes out of the well and floats around for everyone to see him. And I talk about, how he ended up in there. And so, yeah, that, hands down, the best story to tell is that ancient legend there.
How far apart is that distance-wise from where you are? Because I think across a lake, that could be pretty big, or is it in a narrow area?
It's narrow. It's the mouth of the Niagara River. So really, if you were a strong swimmer, you could probably get across there in about 10 minutes.
Let's move over to Hamilton. And, a lot of people know Hamilton as a rough, tough type city, or once a town that really was the epicenter of the steel industry here in Canada. Yet it does have a rich historic past, from Upper and Lower Canada as well. Fill us in on what is happening in Hamilton paranormal-wise.
Well, to kind of shine a light on its uniqueness, I tell you that, Hamilton, yeah, it has that rough, tough. It also has a darker history because of the feeling that it always had to live up to the reputation of Toronto. So it, became the ambitious city, and so many famous people, guys like Martin Short and Eugene Levy, and they're pushed. They need to prove themselves. So for that reason, you had a certain type of energy already from the beginning. Mix in with the fact that the city itself is a creation of older communities. Ancaster is just as old as Niagara-on-the-Lake. So is Flamborough. So is Dundas. Stony Creek, where the Battle of Stony Creek happened, and of course the Barton Township, which is now the center of Hamilton. It's these old communities that were just stuck together as a city. So those two things coming together with its unique history and its long history is the reason why I consider it to be such a haunted place, and why we do so many tours in it.
Tell us about some of the ghosts that are famous around there.
Well, definitely, I mentioned the Hermitage ruins before, and that's one of the, it's definitely the oldest legend in Ancaster history, which is the town where the Hermitage is, now part of the city of Hamilton. And we have the ghost of William Black. So William Black was the servant to the Ives family who used to live on that land. And in his lifetime, he fell in love with the niece of Colonel Otto Ives. And if anybody in the audience, you guys watch Downton Abbey, you know that a woman of station is not allowed to be in love with a lowly servant. So they were shunned. And for that reason, William and the niece, they never told Otto and his wife about what was going on. And after a while, it's said that William felt guilty about this. He saw Otto as a father figure. So he says to the niece, I need to tell him. And the niece is like, isn't our love enough? And she just wanted to keep it a secret, but he did it anyway. And when they were talking one evening, and he finally gets it out and says, I love your niece. I'd like to have her hand in marriage. I'm so sorry I lied to you. And it went the opposite direction. Otto Ives was not happy at all and said, no, a liar, like you can never marry my niece. I don't want you here anymore. And just, cut him off and said, you have to leave. Now, the next day, they say Otto Ives felt guilty about how he treated the young boy and went around to the old carriage house to tell William, I'm going to help you land on your feet. Of course, you have to leave, but, you'll do fine. And when he opens the door, he sees that William had taken his life, and he was hanging from the rafters. So Otto Ives, being a former military man, he didn't think this was a scary sight. He was actually more disgusted than anything else that somebody would throw God's gift back in their face for love. And, he was very angry about that. So what he does is he cuts the body down into a cart filled with manure and pulls the cart up to where Sulphur Springs and Lover's Lane roads meet in Ancaster. And he digged a large hole and dropped William in with the noose still around his neck, fills it back up and tells the niece and his wife that William's gone and he's never coming back. And of course, the citizens of Ancaster, they say that on the night of the full moon, you can see William walking down the winding road from Lover's Lane down to the Hermitage. They say he's looking for his lost love. So definitely one of the most famous ghosts in the city of Hamilton would be William Black.
Tell us about the hauntings that are happening around the Royal Connaught Courtyard.
Now, nothing in the courtyard itself, but the Connaught Hotel. So originally the hotel has one spirit inside of it. You might be thinking, it's a big hotel, it should have more. Well, this one ghost is all it needs because she's very vivid, she's very strong, and nobody even knows who she is. They just know her by what she wears. She's seen in an old Victorian white dress. So they call her the Lady in White. And over the decades, it's been mostly staff members of the hotel. Even in the bright, sunshiny morning, they'll walk out of the room after cleaning it and blinded by a light from the end of the hall, and when their eyes adjust, they see the woman staring at them, and then she disappears in front of them. So the question has always been, well, was she a staff member in life, right? She always left the guests alone. She only bothered the other staff members. But there was one story that went against that. Very quickly, it was just a guest lounging by the pool, and he opens his eyes to see a woman walking alongside the edge. So he's immediately notices something wrong because she looks distraught. She might fall in, she might hurt herself. As well, she's not dressed in normal pool attire. She's wearing a long white dress. So he grabs the concierge, and the concierge is about to say something to her, but he stops because this is exactly what the witness told us. She turned, stepped forward, and walked on top of the water. She didn't fall in, floated in the middle of the pool, and disappeared. Now, I always tell people when I'm telling this story, I always say it's kind of hard to believe, right? It's very over the top. But then I always follow up and say that I actually talked to the witness himself, the guy who saw her. And when I was talking to him, I used a technique. I just wanted to make sure he was telling the truth. So I quickly asked him, how did she disappear? And then gauged his answer. And the guy didn't miss a beat. He told me exactly what she did, and even went to the point of saying the detail about how she shook violently and then vanished in the middle of the pool. And it's that detail, as well as the way he told it to me, that made me a believer in that over-the-top story.
Wow. Moving on, you have so many locations in Hamilton. What is the most haunted location? Or besides the Hermitage Ruins, is it the Dark Trolley or is it the Scottish Rite? What do you feel?
Well, as for secluded locations, I mean, the only ones in Hamilton that are more secluded are the Hermitage Ruins and the Scottish Rite. Ruthven isn't technically Hamilton, it's up in Cayuga, but that one's pretty good as well, because we go through the mansion and then we go to the graveyards on site. But yeah, no, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but one of the most haunted locations that I've ever dealt with in my entire career was that custom house, the one where we had to stop the tours.
So are the people of Hamilton accepting of this type of tour?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'd have to say that Hamilton definitely stands out as a believer city, that you do get many more believers in the paranormal than you would get skeptics here.
Okay, I have an absolute hatred for things like gnomes and gremlins. They just... but you have stories about gremlins in the bell tower of Hamilton.
You know what? It's kind of a sarcastic statement on the history of something that happened in that church. So you can understand, it's not actually gremlins, but so what happens is in the 1940s, St. Paul's Presbyterian Church is 100 years after it was built, got a bell upgrade. So they stuck 40 bell system inside this tower, and it was an advanced system for the 1940s. It was automated, and every on the hour it would play popular Christian music. So right from the beginning, though, the bells, they were terrible. They didn't work, go off at weird times, 10 times their normal volume. And the worst part of it all, the popular Christian music played in the reverse. So the very Christian people of Hamilton at the time, they needed this fixed because that's the devil's music. So they brought in repairmen, and everybody says that there's nothing wrong with the bells. They should just work. So that's where the term gremlins comes in, because back in the 1940s, when something strange happened, you didn't say ghost. You didn't say haunting. You said something like gremlins, where it was unexplainable. So a gremlin was obviously tinkering with it. So it would be the Hamilton Spectator, our main newspaper, who posted headline news. You can look this article up, and it said gremlins in the bell tower at St. Paul's. So the bells just started working on their own after that. So it's almost like the gremlins just wanted a bit of acknowledgement.
Have you ever done the Tivoli Theater?
Yes. You know what? That was one of my favorite places when first starting out in the paranormal. It was about 4 years before the main part of the building fell down on its own because of lack of repairs. But that place was quite haunted, as theaters tend to be. I'm sure you know that. And the place itself had a great energy about it, including a direct connection to a historical figure known as Ambrose Small. And Ambrose is still one of the weirdest disappearances in Canadian history. So to lose that energy because of, people not fixing up a historic building, which is rare around here, but it happened, was an absolute shame.
What is the backstory on Ambrose Small?
Yeah, so Ambrose, he was a theater tycoon back in the early 1900s, owned many theaters in Ontario, including the Grand Opera House in Toronto, and the Grand currently stands in London, Ontario, and also what would become the Tivoli. So in 1919, he signed a contract. He wanted to retire. He was done. So he signs a contract, and they gave him a cool $1 million for all his theaters. He walked out of the meeting, put the money in the bank, visited with his wife for a bit, then went out and bought a Cadillac, visited with his lawyer for a bit, and then after he walked out of the Grand Opera House, we never saw him again. So the question has always been, well, maybe he ran off on his wife and took the money, but no, the money was never touched. So then there was this huge thing, what happened to Ambrose Small? And they talked to his wife. His wife hated his guts because he constantly cheated on her, even had a secret sex room inside the Toronto Grand Opera House. But the police, when they talked to the wife, they said, she's not capable of murder, even though she was so angry. And eventually they got to his assistant, a guy named John Dowdy. Now, John always was jealous of Ambrose's success, even stole money from Ambrose at one point. And when they were about to arrest him, John then disappears too. They would eventually find him, I believe, in Missouri, down in the United States under an assumed name. And when they drag him back, they can't try him on the murder of Ambrose Small. They can only try him on the stealing of the money, because they didn't have a murder weapon, they didn't have a body. But either way, he was put in jail. Now, the Tivoli's connection is quite strange, because when they were cleaning it up in the 1990s to convert it back to a live theater, they revealed this wonderful storage space with steamer trunks. And any movie nerd's dream, like vaudeville posters, movie reels, old props were inside there. And at the very back, there was this one steamer trunk that was more rusted out than the rest. When they opened it up on the inside, it looked like a human skeleton, but they weren't sure. They thought it might be a vaudeville prop, but they had to bring in a forensics team to check it. But the only team was in Toronto, so it took about a week since the guy was already, dead. It was a long time ago. And when they finally showed up, somebody had thrown the steamer trunk out during the renovations because they just thought it was junk, like the rest of the stuff. So if it is true, and maybe this was the body of Ambrose Small, he's currently in a rusted-out steamer trunk in a random junkyard somewhere.
And that's a really good story.
It's very interesting.
The Tivoli, is that Canada's oldest theater company that runs out of there?
No. Right now it's just the abandoned auditorium from the 1920s that's left. The reason why the building itself was the oldest theater building is because the front facade was a carriage factory originally. So the facade dated back to the 1800s, but the theater itself would have gotten going around like 1910 to 1920 with vaudeville. It was a live theater stage, and it's believed that the first talkie movies, where you had actors behind the screen talking along with silent films, started inside the Tivoli.
I got a couple questions from our audience here, as we only got about 4 minutes left with you guys tonight, Mike and Dan. This one comes from Twitter, and Andrew again. He is saying, have you ever had any celebrities join on your tours? If so, who, and what was the reaction to the stories?
For me, I actually haven't. I'm trying to think. We had originally in Niagara-on-the-Lake, I hope I didn't mispronounce it, but an actor named Martin Chokas came out. He was he plays a villain usually in movies, as well as there was a singer who's from Hamilton named Tom Wilson has come out to the walks and events over the years, but other than that, not really.
Yeah, I'm too far away from civilization to get anybody famous up here as well. But you never know. We have had Mike Morin. That's famous enough for up here. Catherine is asking, can you describe with detail the physical effects you feel when you encounter an intelligent versus passive ghost?
You know what? I don't see this as so much intelligent and passive. I've had experiences with conscious and residual energies, which usually fall under the subjects of positive and negative feels to it. The worst negative experience I had, and I'll be very quick with this, was after an investigation. Something followed us back to our home, and you couldn't go into the living room in the dark without feeling anxiety and dread in the center of your chest. And I remember when I finally did a clearing with the help of one of our psychics, I was standing in the dark in that room by myself, fighting the dread, and I closed my eyes, ready to tell this thing to leave, and I'll never forget the feeling. It was almost like something was standing right in front of my face. It was blocking the air out, and that was enough motivation. I got angry, and I felt the air lift when I pushed it out. But yeah, definitely that is the most negative of experiences. But even if you're not psychic, if you walk into a negative space, you'll feel it as tightness or anxiety or dread in the middle of your chest.
As time winds down here, my friend, I would love it if you took the next minute or so to tell everybody about their tours, how they can find you, and when the best time to come on out is.
It's very simple. Just go to ghostwalks.com. Everything's on there for all the tours that we run. And there's a calendar link. You can see when we're running them. Of course, now that we're getting into the winter time, this is kind of the off season. The main season usually kicks off around May, right up to Halloween. And definitely Halloween is the best time.
Do you take the winters off due to the temperatures and everything?
Sometimes. Like Scottish Rite is an inside tour, so that one can be done. But if it's snowing, it can be kind of volatile. Niagara on the Lake, though, goes all year round because, being such a tourist center, people will brave the cold to go on the tour.
Right. Quickly, where can people find you online?
Just ghostwalks.com, and everything links off of there.
All right. Do you have a Facebook page?
Yeah, you can go on Facebook, just search under The Ghost Walks.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for being with us and filling us in on the hauntings in southern Ontario. Absolutely perfect. I hope a lot of our listeners end up heading on over to the Ghost Walks sometime soon.
Excellent. It's been completely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Dave. Mike?
And Mike, you go get better, because I know you're not feeling very well. You've been very quiet tonight. So you keep going. You keep going. You go get better. Ghosts of the Great White North. Next appearance, December 20th, right before Christmas. We'll figure out what we're going to do for then. No idea now, because we got to prepare for hour number 3. The preacher, Eric Markham, is going to join me for the third hour. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with more paranormal talk next.
We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers, whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange. The Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories From alien encounters to the latest conspiracies, you won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, we got Jamie Sexton back from Rebel Planet News. The Rebel Planet happens the third Thursday of every month. We're going to get an update on Las Vegas and other alternative news that has been going on in the month that was. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe.fm, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Tractor. Tractor is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also join us for live chat on Facebook in the SOR Space Travelers group. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. Our brand new YouTube channel is Spaced Out Radio Show. We are adding to the archives daily. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. You can also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Milo, I just signed your poster tonight, so you're going to be getting it soon. We're also got great video footage from UFO Seekers and Contact TV, and be sure to read up on all your strange and paranormal news on the Encounter online, everything at spacedoutradio.com. Hour number 3, we are going to continue with the paranormal chat tonight because we're talked about a paranormal tour called ghostwalks.com out of Toronto, Ontario with Daniel Cumerlato, and we want to thank Daniel for joining us. I do a tour up here, and recently, as of last week, if you haven't gone to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and literally read my latest blog, or any of the blogs, because it's important that you do. My last blog was on what constitutes payment in the paranormal. There is a great debate going on what constitutes whether or not some things should be charged and what shouldn't. Coming in to join me is Spaced Out Radio's resident scientist, Eric the Preacher Markham. Preacher, welcome back. I got to turn your mic on. That way people can hear you. Anyways, let's try that out. For instance, in the paranormal, we have in the paranormal we have ideas of the do's and don'ts. And my recent blog that I had posted on there a couple weeks ago was about whether or not it was time for a paranormal code of conduct for ghost hunting teams, and something set up statewide, countrywide, provincially wide on a code of conduct, much like MUFON has with the UFO experience. And there was a lot of people saying it's definitely necessary, but there was just as many people saying that we don't need it. There's enough rules out there. There's enough things going on. If people just can't be decent human beings, then, to hell with them kind of thing. Yet, as I drop my cell phone beside the studio here, that's never good. Creates a bunch of noise. Let's see. I think we might be having some phone issues here. Let's see. Oh, we lost the Preacher. 1 second here. We're going to have to re-add Preacher here. 1 second here. So, the question is, and I ask all of you in the chat rooms and on Twitter, what is something that we should charge? We got Preacher back now.
Yeah. I think my earpiece is dying on me.
That's all right. That's all right. So, Preacher, there's a lot of controversy, and I don't know how much you heard before your phone died out, but there's a lot of controversy of whether or not, there should be a code of conduct in the paranormal, much like MUFON has for ufology. Do you think when it comes to charging, a code of conduct would allow to define at least some rules for the teams that join up with any type of paranormal organization on what to charge and what not to charge?
Well, my problem with charging for intangible goods is just that. If you're charging somebody something, they ought to have a takeaway. And I don't think for, clearing a house or, some of the less verifiable things should be charged for. I really don't. I mean, a ghost tour, that's fine. You're selling a tour. You're not saying guaranteed you're going to get your butt spanked by a ghost if you come along. I mean, but the tour is the tangible asset. I have a problem with a lot of the psychics that say, oh, you can trust me. I know what I'm doing. Give me $50 and I'll clear your house. That just reeks of snake oil sales to me.
What about paranormal tours?
Oh, by all means. I mean, that's, somebody's taking the time to set up the venue. You're taking somebody through, it's a guided tour. You're just calling it a paranormal tour for that genre. So yeah, I have no problem with that, because the person who pays the money walks away with at least the memory of the tour. I've done a couple myself that, we didn't see anything, but it was fun. It was a nice history lesson. So I walk away with something.
And I understand that, and I make no bones about it. I charge $20 a person for our paranormal tour, and our last one of the year is coming up this Saturday. And I don't have a problem doing that, because as tour guides, we do not collect a dime from it. What we end up doing is we end up turning in the money that we do straight back to the museum. And the museum is nonprofit, it's a society, and it needs the income to try and, get things, keep the upkeep. Now, I'm not going to run the tour in December, January, February, and March when the temperatures can get to, minus 30. And I believe, it was the coldest I'd ever been in this year. Earlier this year was minus 36, I believe, Celsius, which is close to, I believe that's around, oh goodness, I can't even do the calculation, minus 36 Celsius is around minus 30 Fahrenheit, somewhere around there, 28 Fahrenheit. That's cold, man. I'm not bringing people out.
Yeah.
I'm not bringing people out to excuse me, to do the tour then, especially when there's no heat in any of the buildings. That's just dangerous. Now I got to check out convert Celsius to Fahrenheit, because now I want to know. So minus 36. And if you've never been in minus...
cold.
If you've never been... It's minus 32.8 Fahrenheit. Okay? Literally, your fingers start to hurt after about 15 seconds if you don't have gloves on. It is cold, and it's a painful cold. And I know the Ukrainian watermelon, watching his Saskatchewan Rough Riders, will be outside, with just a watermelon on his head and no T-shirt, but they're just that way over there. That's just the way they are, But the whole point is, I have no problem having to take a few months off for the tour, because we just can't do it. And we'll start it up in April again and continue on. But the whole point that I'm getting at is, if the money is going somewhere, I don't even care if it goes into someone's pocket on a tour. If they're taking the time to show the respect and tell the history, that is, to me, okay. Yet to a lot of paranormal investigators, they would have a problem with tours being for-profit type centers to line someone's pockets. What do you think?
No, I disagree, because I feel like you're up front. This is a paranormal tour. You're going to get a history lesson. You're going to get to see some. I think that it's entertainment. You wouldn't expect a movie theater to let you walk in for free. And I think these ghost tours, that's perfectly okay with me. You've got something you're going to take away, something that is tangible, something that you participated in, and that's fine. I have no problem with charging for entertainment. My issue is more with the people that charge for, like, the stuff that Eric Cooper's group does, where they go in and they cleanse, or, they help somebody that's in some kind of paranormal crisis. They don't charge. And I think that that's where we have to draw the line, is between a service and an entertainment.
And I agree with you there, because of the fact that even though groups like Forest Moon Paranormal or whomever are doing cleansings and clearings, you still can't prove that it's gone. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. There's no tangible. You don't walk away with anything tangible that you can hold in your hand or have a memory of, or, it's a completely different type of exchange when you're doing the crisis work.
Exactly. And that is an issue that I have. I mean, if you go on to spacedoutradio.com and go into the encounter and the news section, there's actually a couple of recent articles, one from Washington State and one from Europe recently, where psychics have been fraudulently taking money from clients, saying that we need more money in order to cleanse this spirit. It's taking more time than I thought it would, and my time isn't free. And we see that happening over and over, which continues to give everyone a bad eye. And this is why there are so many investigators out there who are saying, if somebody is making you pay to investigate their house, walk away from them. Just walk right away.
Absolutely. Now, I can see if somebody wanted to pay you gas, and even that's a little sketchy, because then it gets into the mandatory donation type of thing, and if it's a mandatory donation, it's a fee. Let's throw the semantics out. If they're expecting you to give money, you're paying them. So, no, I don't agree with a group being paid to investigate a house. I mean, that's just gravy for the goose. They're getting to investigate a haunted house. That's what they do. That's what their passion is. That's the payment for them. So I agree with somebody saying, "Hey, we'll check your house out for $50." No, don't do it.
Okay, but what about costs incurred? So let's say, for instance, and let's be hypothetical, you get called out to a case that's 75 miles away. You have to put gas in your tank. You decide to grab a meal as well on the fly. You stop at Taco Bell or McDonald's or wherever it could be. Doesn't really matter. Okay? Do you hand them a bill? And this is where things get a little sticky.
No, you don't. I mean, I just don't feel like you should. I think I see what you're getting at, but then again, this isn't, the paranormal investigation thing isn't, most people shouldn't be in it for the money anyway. I don't feel like charging gas or expenses for something like that is legitimate. The only way I can see that would be, legitimate. Say you got an interested party who has an inn or something, and they're just getting started up, and they want you to come in to investigate so that they can put the tag. If the person whose home it is or business it is going to profit
from the tag paranormal activity here type of, yeah, maybe then it would be okay to charge because they're getting something out of it. And there's that tangible asset that's exchanging hands. So yes, I would say for that, charging is fine, but just an individual who thinks they have a haunted house and it's, here again, in the crisis sense, they're not happy about it or, it's causing problems, there should be no charge involved.
This takes to another point in the fact of charging or not charging, is there is a lot of people out there who are even questioning whether or not, if you look to get paid in the alternative media, such as what we do here, on whether or not you should be charging for that, because if you charge or you go on terrestrial radio, that you are, being enslaved by the man, that you are now one of them, and you're not getting the real story across because there's now money involved and you've taken the payment. That your objection has been swayed, so to speak.
That comes down to I disagree in that I don't think there's a problem there because you are now entering that realm of entertainment. I mean, you're selling a show that people are enjoying, and their walk away is the interaction, the information. It's the same as a tour. To me, it's the same as a tour. It's in that same classification. It's a matter of you're actually putting something out there that people have they take something away. There is an exchange. To me, like it's with Spaced Out Radio, I see no problem going terrestrial and having money because it's an entertainment. The fact that you have such a high journalistic integrity kind of cuts away from the money is going to corrupt him. I don't think that's going to happen. So a lot of that depends on the integrity of the person. Plus, you look at some of the popular TV shows, nobody is twisting people's arms to be a fan of these shows. They're getting something out of it. So they're getting something out of it. They should get the pay.
I get that and I understand that. But Everett and I were talking about this. Everett Thiemer from The Encounter and I were talking about this just the other night. A lot of people, to use a similar situation, a lot of people who are musicians or into more the indie rock circuit, the minute somebody gets signed, they immediately say, "Oh, you sold out. You decided to take the money rather than continue with the music." And it's not about the music anymore. It's about the album sales and all of that. And remember the harassment that the band Metallica took from their diehard fans when they released the Black Album, which was more mainstream than their real hardcore rock and roll. And a lot of the traditional Metallica fans went haywire over it. And to this day, the album was released, I believe, in 1991. They are still holding a grudge 20-some years later for it.
That one was a bad example for me because that's the only Metallica album I own and that I like. I don't know. I think sometimes maybe the commercialism can promote or evolve a band or a performance. I mean, it's no longer, we got a handful of fans that love us and we're playing to them. I think it might be a good way of broadening the audience and making the band or the performers concentrate on what they're doing a little more. It might, cause them to stretch a bit. You don't want to keep putting out the same old thing. And I think that's one of the problems with some of the indie people. I know quite a few of them. You hear the album they did 20 years ago and you hear the album they did yesterday, and there's been no growth. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, having to evolve because you've been signed. And there again, the personal integrity of the band. They don't have to, heel over. They can stick with their, look at Rush. I mean, they did what Rush did what Rush was going to do even after they were signed. It almost put them under, but they still did it. So I don't think that's a valid argument. That I think that sometimes people just want things to stay the same, and when they don't, they latch onto something to complain about.
No, I get that. And, I struggle with the traditionalist argument. You know what I'm saying? People are allowed to make it, whether it's in music to get that recording contract, or whether it's on television, or whether it's on radio, whatever it may be, people are allowed to make it. Yet in the paranormal, it just seems that we are always wanting to keep people down. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that to sound negative, because there are a lot of good people in this field. But I guess where I'm getting at with this is we tend to see, if somebody's getting something, we tend to immediately bag on them. Love or hate Zach Bagans, or love or hate Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson, or love or hate Josh Gates, or whomever the, alternative television star may be. They made it. They made it, and they are, reaping the rewards. And is it a lot of jealousy out there, preacher? And I realize that's a simplistic answer. You're just jealous. I know where people are going with that. Is it jealousy, or is it the fact that the traditionalists don't like it?
I think it's a lot of it's sour grapes. I really do. I mean, it's human nature to envy somebody else's success. And say you're a paranormal team that goes out there and does the same thing that some of these others you mentioned do, and maybe they do it better, but they didn't catch the break. Well, they're going to be a little upset about that, and that's understandable. But I still don't have a problem with it, because right then, once you sign over to that, you've entered the realm of entertainment. There is something tangible being exchanged. Like you said, love or hate Zach Bagans, he has a audience, and they just absolutely love him. The ones that follow the show, and even the ones that love to hate him, are getting something out of watching the show. So I don't have a problem with that. I think as long as you keep your integrity up and don't purposely just start playing to the lowest common denominator, because you've got to keep some creative control over your product. And I don't see a problem with getting signed in that way.
I've made no money I've made no bones about it from the beginning. I am very much looking forward to seeing if we could get this show picked up, because I'm a terrestrial radio guy. That is my background. That is what I enjoy doing. I love doing this show. And if you heard Hour 3 and Overtime on Monday night, you would get a good understanding of what we're trying to do with this show. And whether it's Amy Martin or Preacher or Everett or Michael Hall or Olaf Phillips or Catherine James or whoever it is on this team, Tim Doyle, Jolene Lammers, whoever it is on this team that is trying to bring this together, we're all working for the same cause here. We're working for the same cause. And I make no bones about it. That's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to rebuild a radio career here because I love radio. I don't consider that selling out, even though we talk about strange and fringe topics on a nightly basis. But a lot of people out there will say, if you're getting paid to do this, you're obviously not doing it for the right reason. Oh, that's a BS answer, if you ask me.
That's crap. Yeah, that's total crap. Just because you enjoy something doesn't mean you shouldn't get paid to do it. And I think that's the problem with some of these purists is they would like to see themselves do, in our position. And it's just a matter, like I said, it's sour grapes. And I don't see there anything wrong. You aren't getting on the air doing the TV preacher thing where the guy closes his eyes and puts his hand up and says, I see a tumor in so-and-so. And it's that kind of crap. That's reprehensible. We get signed, go terrestrial, turn SOR into what it should be. That's not the same as selling snake oil. I know that the integrity behind the product is going to remain the same whether we are signed or not. So I don't think that it's going to be a corrupting influence or we're not doing it for the right reason. We are doing it for the right reason, and we're expanding our audience and giving this product out to more people.
Well, Jeff has a good point here. He says, once sponsors come into play, they demand more time to sell crap, and the host/guest has less time for the actual show, which has turned off people from the big mainstream show that is on at this same time every night. And I can understand that and appreciate that, especially for the guests. They just get into a story and, whoa, wait, we got to go for a commercial break. That's a pain in the butt. That really is a pain in the butt, and, it's something that I find very annoying, but that's where creative control comes in, in the topic. And I think there has to be a fine balance. Like, for instance, if we went terrestrial, and I'm just saying, if we're lucky enough to go terrestrial, I will be personally putting it in contract that we don't have any mid breaks. So what I mean by that is, if you look at the time clock as a wheel, there would be no breaks at 15 and 45. We may have to put a break in at the bottom of the hour for station identification and news. That's just typical radio, which would probably shorten the break at the top of the hour. But that's something that we will come to at that point. But the integrity of the show has to remain the same because that's what the show is all about. And if you aren't going to maintain integrity, the only people you're not hurting your credibility, you're insulting your listeners. That's what you're doing. You're insulting your listeners, and who wants to do that?
Well, that's how you lose. That's how you lose listeners. I mean, there's a popular host on, like you were talking about, and I used to subscribe to the stream link just to get away from the commercials. But that's always an option. You can always do for a monthly subscription, you get the show without the commercials. That's part of the bad thing about it is to make money, you have to sell something. And that's where, the commercials on the radio. But I love the idea you're only going to interrupt it twice because, you get somebody like John Entwistle on. Or no, what was Simon Entwistle?
Simon, yeah.
Simon, yeah. You don't want to have to break a guy like that up into every 15 minutes or every 7 minutes.
I know.
That guy gets going. You don't want to be interrupted. Even interrupting him at the half hour is going to be kind of hard to do. But
right.
That's just one of the things that's one of the things we have to do. I mean, how often like terrestrial TV, you've got commercials. So, that's how you pay the bills.
Well, I mean, Craig brings up a good point. He says, what if you did Sirius XM, which is one of the places we are trying? And then he says they have mandatory breaks every 15 minutes. Craig, you're lucky I could read through your spelling mistakes there. I'm teasing. A lot of it is just station identification, which I would have no problem doing. Full on, like 3-4 minute commercial breaks, I would have an issue doing. But to mention that, we're on Sirius XM or whatever, if we get to that point, I would have no problem doing that whatsoever.
Yeah, because that doesn't take that. It's not going to interrupt the flow that much. And with your skills at how you lay things like that out, you're going to be able to weave that in. If it's a live where you have to do the break live, you're going to be you're going to know how to segue that in and out to where it's not going to be a major hassle. or major disruption to the flow of the conversation. It's where
exactly.
you got to stop or say 7 to 8 minutes. I cut my cable off because I got sick of watching something, then the commercial breaks would hit, and I'd forget what I was watching. Or, it just broke the flow of what I was watching up so bad that it wasn't worth it.
Mm-hmm. By the way, we're up to 1,155 followers on Spreaker now. Thank you so much for everybody who is following us. We're almost at that 1,200 mark, and then we're going to set the mark for 1,500. I think we're going to grow even quicker here as more people start to find out about what we are doing on a nightly basis here on Spaced Out Radio. Yeah, I agree with you, Preach. I really, really appreciate, the idea of, debating whether or not to charge, getting back to the original topic on a paranormal investigation. I fully understand that. I can appreciate that. And, I think the paranormal field, for the most part, has that right. Yes, there's a few bad apples who are going to do it their way. I mean, it's just the same as people showing up drunk or high or, in filthy clothes going into someone's house for an investigation, that looks like they just got out of, creating a new garden in their backyard. There is that happening. When you look at the paranormal, and we didn't talk about this last week when we did the blog, but when you look at the paranormal, what are the top 3... Let's start negative here. What are the top 3 changes you would like to see made in the paranormal for everyone's sake?
I would like to see there be a standardized code of conduct. I know we've kicked that horse to death, but I would like to see a behavior showing up on somebody's doorstep in a van that's got a rap about Ghostbuster, some kind of, publicity thing, so that when you're parked in your client's driveway, everybody driving by knows that they've got, a paranormal team in their house. I think that's wrong. I think you should show up in business casual at the least and, not have your paranormal group T-shirt on. I think it ought to be professional. I think there ought to be a code of conduct and maybe a mission statement involved. Something out there to thin the field of the hobbyists that go in, stir up a bunch of crap, track mud through somebody's house, and then leave. That's the lowest common denominator, and those are the worst that's the worst kind of behavior. You're a guest in somebody's house. You wouldn't go to your bed, somebody's invited you to their home. You're not going to wear muddy shoes and track up their white carpet. You know what I mean? And I think that part of the problem with some of these groups is they don't look on it as we're guests in somebody's house. They see a chance to go ghost hunting, and that's all they have too narrow a focus, and they just treat it like, an amusement park, and that's not what it is.
What causes that?
I think what causes that is people, and it's human nature to get caught up in what you're doing. But you have to, if you're going to call yourself professionals or even offer services to go into places like that, there ought to be a standard of conduct and, just some common sense, and not forget don't forget that you're in somebody's house. Now, if you're going to some well-known haunted place, who cares? If you're going to Waverly Hills or something like that, that's a commercial venture. They're charging you to get in. Hey, hype it as much as you want. Blast it all over your Facebook page. The North Carolina ghost hunters are going to go to Waverly Hills. Yeah, that's not a problem. But I think you need to separate the known, let's say, paranormal amusement parks from a client's home or a private individual's home. You've got to have that separation.
Do you feel then, like I do, that there is a lot more positive going on than negative in this field, but it's a negative that is getting most of the focus and attention?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You look at the work. I mean, Eric Cooper's group, just to put one out there. Coop's group, I mean, they're doing something almost every day, whether it's their astral team, whether it's their boots on the ground. Every day. You never hear about the efforts that Forest Moon Paranormal is putting out for its clients. But you get that sketchy one that charged $50,000, and fortunately they got sued and got, prosecuted for that. But those are the ones you hear about. It's all the negative ones you hear about that, just make the rest of us look like hucksters. And that's where I think where the whole idea of paranormal unity needs to come together is the groups that have integrity need to, put the ego aside and have a united front against the hucksters out there.
We can go on about the negative. What do you like positively? What is the field doing positively, in your opinion? Give me your top three. Oh,
it's getting more. There is science starting to creep in. I like that. There are some groups that are actually taking a more hands-on approach. They're actually trying to gather their data and do something with it. I think the data sharing, there's some of that going on. It's just in its infancy. But I think I like the fact that it's starting to evolve, and it's starting to chip away at the mainstream, and you're getting some people involved in it that aren't, paranormal gangsters. That's one of my favorite negative examples. But I think there is a groundswell at the grassroots level of people wanting to say, hey, we're not crazies. We're actually interested in bringing this out. We are trying to answer one of the most basic questions that humanity can ask. And I think the focus going past just capturing the EVP, but trying to actually pierce that veil or show that there's something that happens after life is one of the best things. That's one of the most important things we could answer right there, definitively.
You brought up a point about group T-shirts. Group T-shirts. Why do you think that's a bad idea for people going to investigate with their team in their team shirts?
I think it to me, I'll preface this by saying in my regular job, I'm expected to adhere to a uniform or a dress code. Before it was scrubs, it was, in the old days, my profession, I used to have to show up in a shirt and tie. There's a professional. So I'm seeing it from the point of view of being a professional. And I just think that you put people, to me, if a bunch of people showed up on my doorstep with their ghost hunting clubs logos on, I would think that the clown show just arrived. That's maybe me being uppity, if that's, sorry if that's it. But I just think that you should have a more professional appearance when you show up to do something like that. Maybe not shirt and ties, but,
well, I mean, here's the other part of that, and this is what I think, and the reason why, if I have a ghost hunting team, I wouldn't allow our logos to be on a location, unless it was, if you're doing a residential location, not at all. If you were doing a business location or a museum, sure, why not? Because that's what you're there for.
Right.
But here's the issue with the residentials that I would have with that. Okay, what do the neighbors think? Your neighbor,
exactly.
You don't have to live there. And a lot of people do not want their neighbors to know what is going on in their house. Okay? It's none of their business. They don't want to freak out the neighbors. They don't want to do things like that. It's not what it's about.
That comes down to the professional angle of confidentiality. You don't, if you're in a waiting room at the doctor's office, the nurse at the front desk doesn't say, "Mr. Markham, your HIV, test results are here in front of you." And it's the same thing. You should be taking the client's confidentiality, and there ought to be a promise of confidentiality. Maybe you can write the case up later for publication, but the names are changed, the location. Because face it, if you had think of how the media will jump at something, and if you had a home that was, really, really haunted, and the activity was such that it was a constant or, very reliable, reproducible thing, the media would jump on that, be camping in people's front yards, or, it would, destroy, it would mess up the flow of the neighborhood. You don't want to do that. So that's, be aware of the the client's confidentiality. Don't show up in marked cars. So-and-so's having company. Oh, that's great. If nothing else, show up in a plumbing van if you got to show up in something that's marked, so that people just think they're having problems with their plumbing. Don't do a full-scale clown show in their front yard.
No, I fully agree with you. I mean, you have to be able to pay respect to the person who is inviting them into your house. There's another debate going on in the paranormal field these days on whether or not a person from the residence or place of business should be in attendance during an investigation. Many groups say they want the location to themselves, so that way there is no compromising the location. Others will say that they have, they want the resident of the building there or the place of work there because they're the ones having the experiences, and it could enhance any type of communication. Where do you lie on this, on the scientific part?
I think that at a very basic level, I think somebody connected to that property should be in attendance, because that protects both the client and the group. You go through some place, you shoo everybody out of the house, go through, do your investigation, come out. Next thing you know, they're saying, "Hey, where's my this?" They could be wanting to do an insurance scam. "Oh, this bunch came in and stole our Picasso." I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but I think maybe the young children, like have somebody take the youngest children and go, visit the aunt, take them to the movie, get the children out of the place. Because if it goes bad, you don't want them traumatized. But some responsible adult connected to that property needs to be online with the group the entire time. And that just protects the client, and that protects the group at the same time.
So what do you think the argument is on why people would want nobody from the household or business there? They want to investigate themselves.
I think a lot of that is for dramatic effect. That's how it always strikes me. I might not be correct, but to me, that just strikes step aside. We know what we're doing. I think it is an arrogant presumption and a dramatic effect.
Ron is asking, he goes, "Are you suggesting government legislation and licensing for paranormal enthusiasts? It's the only option for unification, control, and consistency?" No.
No, because that's just going to you're going to end up with like the NFL or any other regulation body. Look at what's happened to NASCAR. It's like watching slot cars, because everybody has to have, everything is so codified that there's no invention. It's over-regulated. So no, I think if we start having some kind of governing body like that, the people that are going to be on that kind of government body are eventually going to be, evolve into the ones that, in order to justify their existence, are going to start putting petty bull crap out there. So no, I don't think that's the answer at all.
In my blog, let me just cut you off there for a second. In my blog, I had put, Ron, if you read it at spacedoutradio.com, it's under the news section and then Dave's blog. Okay, what I'm saying by this is what I see happening. Yes, the paranormal has been called into court before. A lot of it is a bunch of shysters trying to take advantage of people. But for those who know the danger in ghost hunting, and those who know that there are plenty of people out there investigating where their only job is to prove or disprove whether a place is haunted, and they will use by any means necessary in order to get that reaction from the spirits. My question is, the more this starts to happen, and I don't know if it's ever happened yet or not, okay, but my question is, why not bring in a not a government legislation, but a team like MUFON, get a bunch of people together, build an organization like MUFON, because the last thing we need is for somebody to do something stupid like scare up a bunch of spirits or piss off a bunch of spirits. That client now goes back into their home and, let's say, hangs themselves because they were attacked spiritually, or they were, possessed by that spirit, basically saying, you did this to me, now I'm going to take your soul, kind of thing. We've seen, demonic things happen before, right? And how long, preacher, until the paranormal gets called to court over a murder case, over a suicide case, because of what happened after an investigation? If that does happen, I could honestly see government legislation cracking down on paranormal teams, saying basically, if you don't get your act together, we'll get your act together for you, or we'll just eliminate investigation altogether. Would you agree with that, or is that a little bit too strict?
No, I can see that happening. That's here again, that's one of Eric Cooper's biggest complaints. These hobbyists go in, they stir the crap pot, and then they leave. And the client's sitting there now, they're totally getting harassed, and there's no one to turn to. I think a proper investigating team, if they go in and see, and I know it's overused, but demonic activity or, really bad activity, that team should have a group that they can call on to cleanse or to ameliorate what's going on. You don't stir it and then leave the client holding the bag. That's wrong. And that, like I said, that's one of Coop's worst, crazy complaints, is he gets all these calls, a team comes in, stirs it up. Now the client's in even worse shape than they started out with, and they don't feel like there's anybody to turn to. That's going to be the problem. And I think it's going to, somebody is eventually going to be mad enough to sue a paranormal group for stirring the pot.
But with no rules, no guidelines, no constitution, any paranormal team would be automatically lost in court.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, the way the American court says, the U.S. court system, you can sue for just about anything. And here again, that group would not necessarily have to lose, but here you go. It's going to be a media sensation. Ghostbusters sued for whatever, and it's going to create more negative publicity for a field that a lot of people already consider, fringe at best. carnival show at worst. So it's going to take like I said, it's going to take the groups with integrity banding together and putting it out, maybe doing the opposite kind of media blitz to bring the good out, the positive out, because bad, as well as I do, bad news sells a lot quicker than good news.
But for a group of people that are already struggling for credibility, I mean, we heard our guest in the first 2 hours that many people in Toronto don't like what he is doing, even though he's bringing revenue to museums, so on and so forth. They don't like it. They don't want to acknowledge it. This field, unfortunately, lacks credibility. And in order to get that out there, you have to start playing by the game. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a lot more for some sort of paranormal MUFON group than I am for, not having the egos that are running the show right now individually. I don't think either is healthy.
Yeah, I think very much we're going to have to, and I don't know where the critical leverage point is, but we're going to have something like Underwriters Laboratories for the paranormal. If this group is not sanctioned by the American Paranormal, whatever you call the group, whether it's a paranormal initiative, whatever the group is, if you're going to have to come up with a body that is recognized as being legitimate and of high integrity, and any group that wants legitimacy is going to have to prove that they adhere to a certain amount of guidelines, and those are the groups that you would want to call, it's like finding a plumber or anybody that works on a house. You don't want Joe Snuffy driving around in his beat-up pickup truck to come in and screw up your house. You look for somebody who is bonded and insured. We're going to have something, the equivalent in the paranormal field of a bonded and insured, or, some kind of mark that says, we're legit, we're sanctioned by this body, we know what we're doing. And they're going to have to prove it. I mean, it's not going to be send in your $50 a year, registration fee, and we'll give you the stamp. They're going to actually have to prove that this is how they do it.
I would agree. And I think more teams would hop on that bandwagon than we give credit for. And, it's funny because out of all the harassing comments, and I wouldn't say they were harassing to me or anything, that's not about me, but out of a lot of the comments that were made, people were like, we don't need more rules, we don't need more education, we don't need more thought control. It sounded like a Pink Floyd song, to be honest. But the whole point that I'm getting at is we saw way too many people, coming on out and criticizing when they wouldn't have to join. You don't need to join. It's just something to think about. Preacher, it's that time, man.
That was a quick hour.
It was a very quick hour. I want to say thank you for joining me in hour number 3, Preach. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
You could read Preacher's latest blogs at spacedoutradio.com in the news section. Would love for you to join us. Tomorrow night on the program, Jamie Sexton is back. We're going to figure out all the alternative news, what's going on behind the scenes with Rebel Planet News, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. I want to say thank you to our guest tonight, the Reverend, the Preacher, Eric Markham, Daniel Cumerlato from ghostwalks.com out of Toronto, Mike Morin from Haunted Crew of Canada for Ghosts of the Great White North that happens the third Wednesday of every month. In the background, you hear Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking us with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of this show. I want to say thank you to everybody on my team for working diligently as we try to make this big and bad every single night. And we're going to continue it tomorrow night once again. But most of all, we want to say thank you to everyone in Twitterverse. You know who you are, using hashtag Spaced Out Radio in the Revolution Radio chat room, like Jer Bear. I know you're listening. I read your comments. Thank you so much. In the Spreaker chat room and on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Really appreciate you taking your time to share it with us and sharing our social media all over the place. I'm getting a lot of new comments from new people whom I've never heard from before, saying how much they love the show. Keep up the great work, because you're doing your job. Because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. I hope you're with me too. So let's have a good one and see you tomorrow. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good one. Talk to you tomorrow. Good night.